trying to defend you, Jenna.
I'll keep that one off the air.
It was wrong what they did to you yesterday, Jenna.
I get poked fun at oftentimes. We don't need to get into details. And Chris Canty was watching the show and came to my defense. And for that, I say you are hands down my favorite guest on the show.
I got your back, Jenna. Even though sometimes you make things a little awkward.
That's the way I've been doing it since birth, Chris.
That's her brand. That's on brand for
Yes, unfortunately, it is all legit. Like, I don't try to.
But really
The boss said, lean into it, Jenna.
Yeah. Lean in.
And I've been doing it. Half the time I'm clueless about it.
You're doing great.
That's why I embrace it. But thank you very much. So, Chris Canty, appreciate you being here. Anything you say is gold and wise.
Canty looking good today.
He does. That's a great looking suit.
I got to keep up with you guys.
Black don't crack. We're the best dressed show in television.
Oh, for sure.
Come on with it.
That's close.
Things are happening.
Let's do this part of it.
Another Jay.
Another black dress.
Another team not interested in Dez Bryant. Don't take it personally, Dez. None of the teams are interested in me, so at least we both have that in common. Cowboys said no, Giants said no, and now apparently the Ravens said no. At last count, we're down to 29 teams. The Ravens, who were previously reported to be interested in Dez, signed former Saints receiver Willie Snead. So, Chris Canty, what does Dez Bryant's future in the NFL look like?
Well, Jenna, Dez Bryant is going to have a job. He's just going to have to wait until we get past this weekend in the NFL draft because teams are solidifying their boards. They're trying to make their concrete draft plans, and they'll deal with veterans that are on the open market afterward, after they see what players they're able to acquire, more importantly, who's not able to address the specific needs at the wide receiver position in the draft. So Dez is going to have a job. I still think he's a player that's capable of contributing, but when you look at the timing of the release, that's why I had a problem with it when the Dallas Cowboys did it, because if they were going to move on from Dez Bryant and it's clear that there were some chemistry issues that players and coaches were concerned with, they were going to move on from him because they didn't try to restructure the contract, they should have done it and gave him an opportunity to get to free agency at the top of the market when teams were doling out those big contracts to guys like Sammy Watkins in free agency. Dez Bryant should have had that opportunity. He's led the Dallas Cowboys in career touchdowns receptions. You don't treat somebody that was able to produce for your franchise like that by releasing him a month and a half after free agency starts.
And supposedly the relationship that he had, Jerry said it was one of the hardest decisions he had. Jason Garrett said, I love him. If you love a person, then you give them the opportunity that would be best for them. Dallas did what was best for their personal situation. So for me, from a PR standpoint, yeah, they said all the right things, but they didn't regard Dez and what was best for him when they released him. The other thing that people should watch is because we're going through the NFL draft process. All of us have been through that process. Sometimes we forget as veteran players that what we have on film is one thing, but also the intel that scouts and other people in the NFL world, that intel that they got on us coming into the league, that follows us just like our medical chart. So Dez, his overall athleticism, it has gone down. Dez has not evolved as a route runner. But also there's some things off the field too. When he came into the league, there was someone who was with Dez to make sure he got the meetings and stuff on time, make sure he got the work on time. That's still with him too. So when you start to see teams not interested in Dez, we can't forget the draft process and all the intel and information that follows a player besides their video and the injury report, all right? That information goes to other teams too.
And that information is something that I get frustrated because you mentioned earlier, Chris, one of my closest friends. Chris gets a bad rap on something from Dez Bryant. Dez thinks Chris Carter's so mean to me on TV. Chris Carter's against me on TV. Chris has been kinder and gentler with this player, given those off-the-field things that people in the NFL know but are not in a position to say, report on, or say on television. But
off-the-field things Dez were involved in.
But know to be true, but will not torch a guy by going on TV and talking about it. Chris has been more careful with that, with this player, than any player in the time I've known him. And I only say that partially in defense of my friend, but also because it's apropos to this conversation. Because while Chris is in the know, he's not the omniscient, all-knowing everything. If Chris knows it, it's not because he was hiring a private investigator. It's because someone in the league has told him. Sure. And that means the guys who are making these league decisions know it. Because from a purely football perspective, we can criticize, listen, Dez was 88th in the league in yards after catch. He was 33rd out of 36 qualifying receivers on reception percentage. Those are bad numbers. But you don't mind having a guy who's 28th in the league in yards as long as he's not first in the league in salary. If he's 28th in salary, you can deal with it. It's the off-the-field stuff that, to me, has made the Giants not even consider it. It's the in-the-locker-room off-the-field stuff that has made him a tougher sell for other teams that maybe people think Dez, maybe the average fan thinks Dez is further past than fairly or unfairly teams in the league think.
Chris, yesterday we reported that the Giants were reportedly going to pass on Dez Bryant, and there were some rumors circulating that the Giants were maybe interested in him. There was a video that he and Odell were working out together. As a former Giant, how did that news land with you that there was a possibility Dez could have played for the Giants? Would he have fit in? Were you surprised that they passed?
Well, I didn't think that the Giants would be interested in it. Knowing Dave Gettleman, that's not the personality that he would want to bring into his locker room. He's already got some chemistry issues that he's trying to clean up from last year, and Dez Bryant is a mercurial personality, no doubt. And so when you have that type of player that's emotional coming off of a situation with the Dallas Cowboys and vocalizing the fact that he wanted to stay in the division, I don't know that that's the attitude that you want to introduce to a locker room given where the Giants are right now. So I think that the Giants were doing the right thing by passing on Dez Bryant. And I think a lot of teams around the National Football League are looking at the situation and saying maybe Dez Bryant needs to cool down from this decision before he can evaluate and make the best decision for him from a football perspective.
So that's interesting. How much stock do other teams, CC, weigh these three passing on Dez Bryant when they go to decide whether to bring him in, or does it not factor in at all?
It doesn't necessarily factor into what they're doing. Each team is evaluating on their own merit, on the information that they have. They're going to trust the intel that they have on the player more. But you have to realize that teams, especially with wide receiver groupings and talking to owners, and Jerry Jones in particular, I talked to him after we drafted Randy Moss. And Randy had the tremendous year. We torched him on Thanksgiving. And Jerry, we had a very frank conversation. And I asked Jerry, how can you pass on Randy Moss? And he said at the time, he was still having issues with Michael Irvin, and he couldn't bring those two in the same locker room. But if he had me in the locker room, and at that point, I was a little beyond where Michael was, and Dennis Green, the organization, felt like I was the perfect landing spot or the person to be tandemed with Randy Moss. Jerry Jones told me that himself. The reason why he didn't draft Randy Moss was because of the locker room that he had and situations in that locker room. Other people in the NFL, because he's such a public figure, you have to do the research. And in doing the research, I'm sure that certain people are going to decide either we're going to, there's a reason why Sammy Watkins got signed in Kansas City. There's a reason why Dallas went with Allen Hurns. There's a reason why Chicago went with Allen Robinson. The one thing all three of these guys have in common, there's two things they all got in common. They're young, they're injured, but off the field, they don't have question marks about them. So we much rather take a guy who hasn't been as productive and has maybe some potential,
but less to worry about in that locker room.
Well, and the Odell factor. If Odell were Larry Fitzgerald, then maybe this is a different situation in New York. If you're Larry Fitzgerald is still a very good player, but forget the age part of it.
Yeah.
But that composure and that the lack of anything off the field.
Just like Arizona, they went to Larry as a businessman. Larry, you're a little beyond your prime. We'd love to have you in your career here. You need to take less money. And that's what Larry Fitzgerald has done the last several years so he could extend his career.
And he's still a highly productive player, but he's also a guy you don't worry about. If we bring in this wide receiver, he and Larry are going to be combustible. You know, as much as... Yeah,
as long as you don't pay him more money than Larry. Larry cool with that.
Chris, stick around. We're going to talk a little Patriots on the other side. Will Tom Brady ever retire? His agent doesn't seem to think so. Next on First Things First.
The agent don't make money if Tom retired. No, you talking about Giselle might
do.